They are business leaders, experts in economy, society, and culture. In 15 minutes, their insights will create a vivid picture of Vietnam. Sharing Vietnam, the country as you see it.
Hello everyone and welcome to Sharing Vietnam of NetViet channel VTC10. I'm your host, John Chun. Our show features foreign guests who will be sharing with us their unique experience on living and working in Vietnam. The aim of our program is to provide you with invaluable insight as well as an in-depth look into a young and rising country. Our guest for today is Ambassador of Brazil to Vietnam, Mr. Joan de Mendoza Lima Neto. Mr. Mendoza, pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure, John. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. Before we begin, here's a clip on Mr. Mendoza's life in Vietnam.
Mr. Mendoza arrived in Vietnam more than 3 years ago for his ambassador assignment. He has a beautiful office overlooking the West Lake in Hanoi. The embassy also has a film showing room to show Brazilian movies to Vietnamese students and supports book translating activities. In his free time, Mr. Mendoza enjoys traveling and photography. He has taken many pictures of the places that he has been to in Vietnam.
Hello everyone, welcome back. So Mr. Mendoza, you actually came very highly recommended. Can you give us a little information about your life in Vietnam?
Oh, well, I don't even know how to begin it. But perhaps I should say how happy I am to be in Vietnam. I have been in Vietnam for 3 years and a half.
Wow, very long time.
And these have been very good years. Vietnam, in many respects, reminds me of Brazil.
Oh, I see.
Especially the beaches, of course. You have the most beautiful beaches in the world. And myself being from Rio, I miss the beaches. The countryside, it reminds me also very much of Brazil. We're very similar in terms of geography. We are opposite sides of the hemispheres, but we are very similar in that sense.
Great. And where have you been in Vietnam so far?
I haven't been to every place I would like to be. Of course, I have been in the south, in Ho Chi Minh. I have been in the center, in Buôn Ma Thuột, in The Plaque. I have been Da Nang, Hue An, which I love so much. But it's not enough. I wish I could go to other places.
That's great. So, Mr. Mendoza, I'm sure you encounter a lot of difficulties living in and adjusting to life in Vietnam. Can you share with us some of the difficulties?
In fact, not. Not at all. As I said before, Vietnam is very similar to Brazil. So, in fact, it's rather easy to adapt to Vietnamese
But even
life.
Even the traffic?
But there is some
there
little details.
There we go.
The first one is, of course, the language.
The language.
Unfortunately, this is the first country that I have been in my whole of my career where I did have enormous difficulties to learn. And I haven't learned Vietnamese.
Do you know any?
Nothing.
Okay.
Well, just enough to know that I don't know anything.
Exactly.
The second thing, obviously, is the traffic. I tried, to be frank, I did try to learn how to use the motorbicycle. But the trees in Vietnam are very dangerous. They tend to come in front of the motorbicycles.
Oh, I see.
So I had an enormous accident in front of a tree, and I never wanted to touch a motorbicycle again.
So you're traumatized.
So I'm traumatized. I didn't want to see anymore.
Oh, that's good. Well, then you get around by car.
I get around by car, and somebody has to drive it.
Okay, just to make sure. And so, Mr. Mendoza, Brazil is known for samba and its carnival, vibrant carnivals, and soccer. Number one.
Yes, sir.
Have you attended any of these activities, which is also popular in Vietnam?
Well, to be one of the first things I managed to do, and in fact it wasn't really me, but more my government, was to bring the Brazilian national team to Vietnam in 2008, just after the presidential visit. And that was something very special.
Definitely.
But it's difficult to bring other teams to Vietnam.
Oh, it's very difficult, yes.
The Brazilian soccer schedule is very tight. So I'm still hoping to bring them again.
Well, you still have lots of time.
But we do have lots of Brazilian football players in Vietnam,
you
in
do?
many teams. So this is something to be proud of.
Oh, well, playing on Vietnamese teams?
That's right, yes.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
very interesting.
Oh, this is...
And so, a favorite topic here is food. How have you enjoyed the food? in
Oh, the
Vietnam?
food is wonderful. Especially because this is very different from Brazilian food. Brazilian food is normally a bit heavy.
I
Lots
see.
of meat,
I see.
rice, and different sauces and condiments. Vietnamese food is very light. It's very healthy. So I do enjoy very much.
There's a positive and a negative.
Oh, yes, it's absolutely true. There is one speciality of Vietnam that I really enjoy. It's cha ca.
Jacka.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
It's,
good.
Very, very good.
Well, unfortunately, we got to get into business. And so,
well,
can you explain a little bit about your job as ambassador to Brazil and Vietnam?
well, I would say to you this. Ever since I've come to Vietnam, I have been insisting that the biggest problem that we have between our two countries, the reason why we don't have more business, is that it's not the problem of geography, it's not the problem of language, it's the problem that we don't know each other enough.
I see.
So my work, and I'm sure it's the same thing for the ambassador of Vietnam in Brazil, our work is to try to
Build
show
that
our
relationship.
countries and
Promoting and-
and in this sense I'm very happy to be here because this gives me a chance to talk about a
that's
little bit
great.
about Brazil.
That's great. And, more than just, economics, is culture, it's the whole
I
thing.
think that the first thing is culture.
Culture first.
This is where you have to start. Because it's very difficult to go out and say, well, look, do business with Brazil.
Exactly. You
But
have to
once
understand-
people
you can
begin to understand more about Brazil, the potentials of my country, then people will want to do business in Brazil.
And then the business and economic ties and
That's
bilateral
right.
trade
That will all come
will definitely
very
come.
naturally.
No, very much so.
So people don't tend to, they tend to forget or not understand the role of the ambassador.
That's right.
I believe that my role, especially, is culture. This is the first thing that I have to do.
No, that's great. Here's a clip on the economic cooperation between Brazil and Vietnam.
According to Brazilian President Lula da Silva in his 2008 visit to Vietnam, Vietnam and Brazil had made positive developments since they established their diplomatic ties in 1989. Trade turnover had increased from 43 million in 2002 to 323 million in 2007 and was expected to reach 1 billion in 2010. However, he said the two sides had not yet fully tapped their potentials, citing that Brazil stands 65th among investors in Vietnam. Thus, there are much more for both governments to work on to develop cooperation between the two countries.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We're talking to Mr. Mendoza, ambassador of Brazil to Vietnam. And so, Mr. Mendoza, trade volume between Vietnam and Brazil has actually increased significantly in recent years. How do you describe the recent increase in trade volume between Brazil and Vietnam?
Well, it's phenomenal. I think that's the best way to describe it. We are growing, and we have been growing steadily.
I see.
More than 20-30% every year.
Wow.
This year, at the moment, compared to the same period last year, we have grown 60%,
Wow.
which is quite enormous. Which means there's nothing very special about the work that I do. It means that people are getting to know each other more. Businessmen have gone to Brazil. They're beginning to see other businessmen that have done business in Brazil that are doing well. So it's growing. Let's
So
put it that
just
way.
naturally,
Yes,
as we get
it's
to know each
natural,
other,
yeah.
then that's great. And what are some of the opportunities present for Brazil and Vietnam in trading with one another?
Well, I think that we are scratching the surface. Brazilian economy is a very large economy.
I see.
We are
The
200 million.
actually,
Yes.
fifth largest
Oh no,
country in
the
the world.
eighth. We'll get there. We'll get there. But it doesn't matter where we are. We are 200 million people.
Wow.
We have been
Extraordinary.
growing over the last 8 years around 5%, which is quite significant.
Wow.
Well, it's the same as Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam is a 90 million people.
Yeah, definitely
the Vietnamese economy has been growing 6-7%. So the potential is there.
Exactly.
So there's a lot we can do between our two countries. This is what I'm saying. We are only scratching the surface. We can do much more.
So you talk about it before, not knowing about one another, and that's one of the difficulties. What are the other difficulties in doing business between Vietnam and Brazil?
You can always say that there's the distance, the geographical distance, the difficulties in the language, but I don't think this stop has ever made trade stop. On the contrary, if we are growing 60%, you can see that things are going well. So there's a lot of potential. I think that a Brazilian economy, like the Vietnamese economy, it's quite open. And I believe that there's lots of things that Vietnam produces more and more that can be absorbed in Brazil. And the other way around, this is my work too. There's lots we can do here.
Thank you. Let's take a break and look at a clip on the relationship between Vietnam and Brazil.
According to Vietnam Business News, the export of Vietnamese char fish to Brazil is being delayed as Brazilian agencies have extended the time to grant char fish import certificate from 3 days to 120 days. This has great troubles for both importers and exporters. Brazil has also listed Vietnamese char fish on its specialty list, which imposes an import tax of 35% instead of the usual 10% import tariff.
Hello everyone and welcome back. So Mr. Mendoza, earlier this year, Vietnamese char fish exporters faced some difficulties in Brazil. The import tax, for example, was changed to 35%, which is much higher than the usual 10%. How do you explain this issue and what is the solution to it?
John, I will try to be frank with you. I'm not quite sure where this 35% figure came from. We have been at the embassy trying to find out exactly what has happened. But I believe this is not true. But I might be wrong, of course. But anyhow, I think that the point, and I think that this is what certainly is important, is that our trade has increased significantly over the last few years.
60% is quite a lot.
60% in 6 months, where we had 50% last year. It's growing significantly. We have gone above $1 billion, which is quite significant for countries that are so far and have so little tradition in our relationship. But anyhow, this is all to say that I believe that the more our trade grows, the more frictions we will have. This is absolutely natural, in commercial affairs. There are some areas that for example, Brazilian exports create problems here in Vietnam. In some areas that Vietnamese create problems in Brazil. The question of the fish exports, the char fish in particular, is quite significant. Vietnam started to export char fish to Brazil over the last 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, 2.5 years. These exports have been very, very successful in Brazil.
I see.
The fish, the Vietnamese fish, the quality of the fish is very good and it has been accepted. However, it has started to come to Brazil at a time when the Brazilian government is trying to develop the fish industry.
Oh, I see.
As incredible as it might seem, Brazil is not a traditional producer of fish, or exporter of fish. We have a small industry that was sufficient for the market. The market in Brazil over the last 8 years has increased significantly. The government was very successful in guaranteeing sustained growth over these years.
I see.
So the market has grown. And one of these areas where the government lately has been trying to promote growth is in the fish industry.
So naturally, you know.
So Vietnam exports have started to come in exactly when the government
policy has changed. So
has been trying to develop the industry. So there is some friction in this area.
And by no means is that a way of keeping fish exporters from Vietnam out. It's just it happens to be naturally in the market.
At the moment, it's a little bit complicated. The important thing, this year in November, we will have the joint commission. We have a joint commission between our two countries. It will be a time to discuss these subjects. It's not only fish. From the Brazilian side, some of the meats have difficulties coming into Vietnam. We believe this is natural. It's an important thing is that it will not. These problems should not poison a very, very good relationship.
With lots of potential as well.
Lots of
So how do you envision the relationship growing in specific industries or areas that can strive between Brazil and Vietnam?
Well, the Brazilian economy started to grow many more years before Vietnam. The Brazilian Industrial Revolution, shall we say, it started just after the Second World War. Vietnam, unfortunately, was hampered, and only over the last 20 years, Vietnam has started to grow significantly.
Yes.
Well, this only means that we have a little bit more tradition in some areas. And in these areas, we can cooperate. All of the agriculture sector in Brazil is very dynamic, very competitive. I think we have lots to cooperate in Vietnam in trying to develop Vietnam more quickly. There are other areas, of course. In the industrial area, Vietnam has been very successful in attracting foreign direct investment in the area of electronics and equipment and machinery. This whole Brazilian economy has been importing.
I see.
Many people do not know, but Vietnam nowadays is a big exporter of cement, of steel to Brazil. It surely goes to show what the Vietnamese economy is doing.
Exactly.
It's a big potential.
So actually, it seems like there's a very bright future for the relationship between them.
I hope so. We have a very special relationship between Brazil and Vietnam. It's a mutually beneficial, it's a win-win relationship. That is, and as I said, I think we are scratching the surface. We can go much further.
So what are plans to develop this relationship, you personally and then just overall?
Well, I think we have to continue on this path that we have gone through. We have been over the last 20 years of our relationship. We had many exchange visits, which were important. In these visits, businessmen come along. They follow our leaders, and so they get to know more and more of each other.
I see.
We have to be more present in fairs in Vietnam. I think Brazil has not been an investor in Vietnam. This is something that I've been trying to work with my government
to encourage more
because
people.
It's extremely important. Vietnam is an important hub in ASEAN, and we could use
it's a great
Vietnam.
emerging market right
exactly,
now as well.
Exactly.
So that's great. So the future seems very bright.
Oh, we have to do more.
Exactly. And I just want to ask you about your own personal plans for the future. Are you here in Vietnam for a little while?
I wish I can stay more. I'm not quite sure. The life of a diplomat is
it's always constantly changing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have at the end of this year will be 4 years here.
Wow.
So,
so perhaps a change of scenery, but you're always welcome back, and especially welcome back into the studio.
No, I hope so. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Neto.
It's a pleasure to
join us
with
today.
you. Thank you.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our show for today. Thank you for watching Sharing Vietnam. From all of us from VTC International, I'm John Chun. Live for today, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Cảm ơn ông Joan de Medoca, Lima, Neto và Joan Trần. Tiếp theo chương trình, mời quý vị và các bạn quay trở lại với biên tập viên Nguyễn Tùng để đến với câu chuyện hội nhập của ngày hôm nay.
Xin cảm ơn Mai Phương. Thưa quý vị và các bạn, Việt Nam phát triển bền vững ngành chế biến gỗ ra sao khi đây là một trong những mặt hàng chủ lực và nhu cầu về mặt hàng này ngày càng tăng đối với những đòi hỏi khắt khe hơn. Đây chính là nội dung của câu chuyện hội nhập mà chúng tôi muốn gửi đến quý vị trong chương trình ngày hôm nay.